See if I can record. Oh, right. So this is following on number 2 from number one of 2, and then hopefully there'll be more presentations from Chris Coverdale about his work and his how it's culminated in his documents, which we'll be covering, continuing from yesterday. So I'm going to share screen back to the Supreme Court's case 2013 of Gull. So just for that record, that's the Gull case number. I just want to quickly show. Oops, sorry. This is the video of the 2013, which I'm hoping that Chris will just summarize. Then John MacDonald's website is here at john-macdonald.net. Annie Machon's website is at anniemachon.ch. And then where we left was we were reading the paragraphs in here, I think, 26 and 28 of the Gull judgment.
Yes, that's right.
That's where we were. Sorry about this. I'll just make us small. There we go. So if you wouldn't mind, Chris.
Yes, right. So it is important just to understand that the UK Supreme Court had a case concerning what do we mean by the word terrorism. So the definition of terrorism was clearly stated, and in their ruling they said the following things. The legislation, being the Terrorism Act 2000, does not exempt nor make an exception nor create a defence for nor exculpate what some would describe as terrorism in a just cause. Such a concept is foreign to the 2000 Act. Terrorism is terrorism, whatever the motives of the perpetrators. Terrorist action outside the United Kingdom, which involves the use of firearms or explosives resulting in danger to life, is terrorism. So that's a very clear definition. They went on to say, as a matter of ordinary language, the definition would seem to cover any violence or damage to property if it is carried out with a view to influencing a government or IGO in order to advance a very wide range of causes. Thus, it would appear to extend to military or quasi-military activity aimed at bringing down a foreign government, even where that activity is approved, officially or unofficially, by the UK government. So there we have it, quite clearly stated that this applies to the UK government, and not only to the military and quasi-military activities. Quasi-military activities, I'm assuming, is police activities, but also because the law is all about the payment of money for terrorism, it applies to all taxpayers at all times. So where should we go from here, Neelu?
And then we were going to cover the other document, so I'll just go on to the other document. So we were going to cover this document.
So let me just put this into context then. Most of my life I've been looking at solutions, initially for companies in the way that they work together and so on. And since 2003, I've been looking at solutions to how do we stop war? How do we end warfare and the criminal offences being committed by our leaders? As I've got more to understand the nature of what is going on in this country, I've realised that we really are operating in a bit of a tyranny. Not a bit, a tyranny. And we need to really pull back and try to find ways of operating as a true democracy. So I have been working for the last 15, 20 years trying to find different ways, different systemic changes we can make in order to move us from tyranny to true democracy. One of the main ways that the current elite take hold of all the activities in this country is through the corporation. So corporations now run everything in Britain virtually. And the benefit for them is that they have what is called limited liability. So they are limited companies, and limited by, that gives the members of the company limited liability. So what is happening is that large organizations are always merging and taking over other organizations until we have two or three, possibly two organizations, Vanguard and BlackRock, that own virtually everything in the whole world. And we need to use the system they use to take control of the country and the world. We need to use the same systems against them. So what I had a look at is, how do we set up our own corporate bodies with limited liability to ensure that we as the people can work together to achieve our own aims, and at the same time as undermining the activities of the elite. So I found out that a change in the law in this country took place in 2014 in the Cooperatives and Community Benefit Societies Act, which enabled cooperatives to be what's called multi-stakeholder cooperatives. That is equivalent of a holding company, a large holding company. Prior to this, cooperatives had been members, individual members, working together in businesses like engineering firms or design firms. And they had decided the future and direction of the organization themselves as a cooperative activity altogether. The benefit of a multi-stakeholder, limited liability platform community cooperative is that it can have business members as well as individual members. Now, this is important in that businesses can be members of the company and only get one vote alongside all the individual members. So it brings the power of a corporation within that structure down to the same level as the individual members of the organization. So what I then thought about was, okay, what we really need is decentralized decision-making in this country, and we need to take the decision-making power away from the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and the Ministers of State, and bring it right back down to local people. The best way of doing this initially is to bring forward the power of the money and to refuse to contribute to the operations of the tyranny, if you like, which is what we've all been going through with the taxation trusts and so on. But secondly, we need a corporate body to take over the activities of the central government locally. And this is why I'm suggesting setting up community co-ops of this particular type, being multi-stakeholder, limited liability platform community co-ops. Now, the benefit of let me just go through those three terms. Multi-stakeholder means it can have businesses as well as individuals as members of the co-op. Limited liability means that every member of the co-op, providing it is a co-op limited by guarantee and not by shares, is limited to their losses are limited to the value of their guarantee. So if every member, including the businesses, guarantees £50 or £100, or in some cases £1, that is all they can lose if the company goes bust. Now, this is actually a very important advantage to have a limited liability, because it enables the directors of the large organizations to have an immense protection from any being sued. So if a company makes a mistake and Big Pharma, for instance, produces bad medicines that cause problems and is sued for, say, $2 million, $5 billion, whatever it is the company that loses the pays the money, and not the directors who caused the problem. So this gives the directors great advantages. They often award themselves bonuses after the event. So what we need to do is to bring back the power of that to the multi-stakeholder limited liability co-op, and have none of the risk that is normally borne by individuals in when they interact with other people. Calling it a community co-op is that it is really focused on making a success of local communities. We all need to take part in trying to create a thriving, good local community that does not get involved in mass murder and genocide and warfare, or the medical genocides that have been going on, but runs our own affairs in our own way, under our own control. And so that's the benefit of having a community co-op. Lastly, it's a platform cooperative, meaning that it can operate on the internet. Prior to 2014, when you had an annual general meeting to decide the direction of the company, you had to notify members of the place and the time at which it would be held. And if they weren't able to get there, they had to appoint somebody else to vote on their behalf. Nowadays, because of the internet and so on, we can do all of that meeting on Zoom, as we are doing right now. So we can have official meetings of the company on Zoom or on other platforms that enable people wherever they are in the world to take part in the direction of the organization. So this is the benefit of having community co-ops. And I'm recommending that in all sorts of ways, that people in every constituency in Britain set up a separate, independent, interdependent community co-op. So that, say, we have 650 constituencies in Britain at the moment. And instead of all the decisions being taken by Parliament, supposedly by Parliament, but in fact by the Cabinet, we can then make our decisions in each one of those 650 independent constituencies. And the reason for having it in a constituency is to have power over what goes on in central government. If we have a really effective community co-op in one constituency, then the MP for that constituency will have to respond to our needs and our instructions, rather than ignoring the instructions of the local people and just taking their instructions from their party leaders or the government. So that's really why we set them up in the first place. What we're trying to do is to set them up all over the country to support the tax resistance activities that we have got going with the taxation trusts. So that's a brief introduction to what that's all about. And do you have any questions?
Yeah, so the intergovernmental organizations and the charities, are they going to step aside to allow us to do this properly?
You mean organizations like the World Health Organization and others? That's I'm really focusing on the moment and what we can do in the UK. I think if we get this going, everything that I have said is applicable around the world. It's not just the UK organizations and others that will feel the bite of a tax rebellion, but it can be done in every country that is signed up to the UN Charter. So we have the opportunity to undermine the activities of the World Health Organization, for instance, in Britain initially. And then as we spread the whole thing, then we can perhaps make sure that their activities do not impinge on the desires and wishes of people all around the world, and that they can't control everything to do with health throughout the world. That has to be controlled by us locally and by individuals, and not by bodies like the World Health Organization and other NGOs, as you say, who are impinging on our lives in a very nasty way, in particular places like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, organizing the finances of the world. Does that help? I mean, it's not really answering your question, but trying to.
Well, originally, wasn't it that all these countries and organizations were set up because you only needed 12 signatures to set something up, or 24, and that was law. It became law. But now, even if you have a petition with 4,000 signatures in America, they don't accept anything of public interest unless you have 100,000 signatures. Which, if the countries are not listening to their people in the thousands, then they're a dictatorship. And should we not just abandon? Are we actually negotiating with mass killers and mass murdering policies, profit-led policies? Then do we need to be within it, or can we be outside of this structure?
I think we're taking ourselves outside of this structure. That's the important bit about what I'm suggesting to do with sovereignty. We're saying that, look, it's us that takes the decisions, not the government, not Parliament, not the cabinet, not the monarch. It's us, and we need to take that over. Unfortunately, for the last 300 years, we've been very subservient to and obedient to the orders of the governments. We need to now reverse that process and say, now we give the orders. These are the laws and things that we want to impose on ourselves, and we want you to abide by them. And we've given ourselves the power to do this by taking back our power over the money, over the tax. No government can operate effectively unless it has the support of the people. And that support is fundamental when we pay tax. I would just like to say that every time we pay tax, we give our tacit consent to how the money will be spent by the government. And so they have been operating to assuming our consent for the last 300 years. And it's time we said, no, we do not consent to our money being used for mass murder and so on. But we will decide it for ourselves how that money will be used. And in order to have a body that enables us to decide for ourselves in communities how the money will be used, we have to set up some sort of alternative to local councils. And that's really what we're suggesting with these community co-ops.
And also, I wanted to mention that the United Nations Charter, which I've got the document I'd like to share, obviously it's been breached by this country, and there's got to be that remedy under that charter was, what do you do with the countries that misbehave? So we've got names of at least 6 countries that have violated it. So what can we do about that?
Yes, so this is the difficulty with the the International Court of Justice has, although it's the body that's been set up to deal with these things, initially in 1945, it depends entirely on the particular countries implementing its decisions. And it has no force, if you like, other than the moral force of its decisions. So, for instance, when the Israelis built the wall between Israel and Gaza, that was condemned by the International Court of Justice, but of course Israel has done nothing about it. They pay no attention to the rulings. So we do have a problem internationally, which is really why we have to start something locally and nationally, and then spread it around the rest of the world. So the UN Charter is that law that is best describes the agreements made between nations, and we have to make sure that we uphold it. Now, after 50 or 60 years, the International Criminal Court was set up finally in 1998 with the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And that provides a much tighter form of accountability. And it started to work. Unfortunately, it's just African leaders at the moment who have been held to account in the International Criminal Court. But it applies to everybody in Britain and to all those leaders in 125 nations who have ratified the statute. Now, does not mean Israel or America, and there are other big nations who have not signed up to that statute. However, there are ways and means of getting at their leaders. But the important bit to remember in this, in the Rome Statute, is that this applies to our leaders, to every individual in Britain, because we signed up to it in 2001. And so in 2001, when the Queen signed the law, the International Criminal Court Act, it could have been used against her. What she did was to devolve jurisdiction over 6 crimes to the International Criminal Court. And that was the first time in 1600 years that we had lost jurisdiction over our own affairs. We'd given it away. Prior to that, it had been when the Romans took over Britain. If a leader was held to account, he would necessarily be taken to Rome to face judgment there. Now, what happened in 1998 was that we signed this agreement, and in 2001, the Queen gave jurisdiction to the International Criminal Court over herself, her government, and every British citizen. But that piece of information, which is fundamental to all of us, was completely lost. The media made no mention of it at all. The government made no mention of it at all. And so hardly anybody in this country realizes just how powerful the law that we introduced in 2001 is, if we want to hold our leaders to account for their crimes. And the whole of the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court Act is focused on the actions of our leaders. It's not just the soldiers who perhaps will kill enemy soldiers elsewhere, or RAF pilots dropping bombs on innocent men, women, and children who take the brunt of the crimes, but it is the leaders who order those things to take place. So we need to start using the International Criminal Court Act, and in particular the Terrorism Act 2000, which is related to the payment of the money to fund these crimes.
Yes, there are at community local level here in Britain, we've got tens of thousands of people who are not registered to vote. The reason why they chose not to register is because they see that all of the local government authorities and parliament have become corrupt, and they're abusing their authority. They're breaking the laws of England, traditional laws that have been here for thousands of years, and they're making a mockery, and people refuse to partake. Secondly, the candidates that are put up to be elected are totally unfit. Some of them are mentally insane and deranged. And that includes Lord Mayors as well. And they're totally incompetent, uneducated, and quite barbaric, in fact, and should be excluded from all political activity, and that includes lawyers, qualified lawyers. Some
Yes.
of them are totally insane.
Yeah, Lee, you have to be careful because obviously my YouTube channel is going to be subjected to libel, so we're not mentioning any names.
No, there's no names, but okay. So therefore, and those people, those hundreds of thousands, are paying. They're being forced to pay tax.
That's why we've got to set up these cooperatives. We've already got the remedy for that. Is that we're taking the power away from the central and local governments, by making the declarations. But I still think we need to take criminal prosecutions. We need to resurrect the criminal justice system in this country, which does not exist. It's being hijacked by the civil courts, and the International Court of Justice is still in The Hague. A building is next door to the International Criminal Court, isn't it? They're next to neighbours. So that's why I was thinking that because the International Court of Justice has done nothing about these countries that violated the UN Charter, that we would be then, the cooperatives and the sovereigns would be then looking to prosecute these countries for violations, and we would be seeking compensation for past extortions for the use of terrorism. We would be looking to recover those, and we would make claims. That's what I think, that to stop further interference further down the road. And we would have to give the message that we do not accept past crimes as well as current crimes as well as future crimes, because on the criminal timeline there is no dead and expiry of dates.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very important.
What do we do, Chris, with this problem now, where hundreds of millions of people are not voting, and yet they're being forced to pay?
No, Lee, we're not trying to fix that shuttered system. We're saying we're going to set up a new platform. We're going to treat that old platform as a criminal entity, and we've got claims and compensations against it. We have to give the message of backdating, because the criminal intent and the criminal mindset does not understand that they have to be accountable all the way back to 78 years of everything that's been done with our money that we want to put to good use. God's, again, sovereign means divine, godly, inherent qualities that we have. We don't fight. We're not born to fight. We don't fight for this kind of reasons, that we want to steal people's lands and homes, and we want to build our corporate structures in their villages, sending floods and opening up the dam doors and saying, when it's raining, saying it's bad weather. It's not. So total destruction. They've done it in India. They're doing it now in South Africa. This is just terrorism. The waterways, they have to control the waterways so the dams don't overflow. They have to, they put droughts in. They don't do the irrigation properly. We need to control our waters. We need to control our peace and prosperity. And then we have got the prosperity amounts that the banks have been laundering the money. We've got the case with the case of against the Lloyds Banking Group, the Halifax HBOS in Reading case, which started also in 2013. We've got a calculation of almost 200 billion laundered every year since at least 2013 till today, ongoing, despite the jail sentences of those bankers. So we have got criminals in banking that are carrying on against the UN Charter, against all of that, the peace and prosperity remit of the International Court of Justice. So we are in a very good position now with what Chris has done for us to take that forward, to make declarations that we do not consent to being part of this criminal dictatorship, global dictatorship, and we're going to recover our illegally extorted taxes. Over.
So can I just comment very briefly on that? I think the important thing is we are in a difficult situation right now, and we need to move to a much better situation in 3 to 4 years' time. And that will take a bit of time, and we need to do it gently and without violence, if you like. And there are a number of things that we can do to back that up. I've mentioned the first two, and now I think it's worth really building on what you're saying, Neelu, of bringing prosecutions against particular individual leaders and taxpayers. Now, what's been happening is that the major problem we have in this country is that our banks have been funding war and warfare for 75 years, and the major aspects of our national debt are all brought about because of warfare in the past. Now, it is a criminal offence for a bank director to hand money to the British government if you know that it will be used for purposes of terrorism. So what I'm recommending is that we start taking out criminal prosecutions of directors of large corporations and of banks under the Terrorism Act 2000 and the International Section 52 of the International Criminal Court Act 2001. If we get one of our leaders prosecuted, convicted in court of conduct ancillary to genocide for what they have done, that will change things overnight throughout this country and around many parts of the world. And so that's really what we need to do. And one of the things that we've done over the last 20 years is to report war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide to every police force in the country, and asking them to to uphold and enforce the law. Sorry, that's my phone going. I'll ignore it for the moment. When we take someone to court, we can force them to abide by the law of this country. And that's the real issue. If we have a genuine law enforcement system, but we don't in this country. And our problem is, as you say, that the courts, the judges, the Crown Prosecution Service, the police are all in the pockets of the government and do not uphold